Grace and peace, beloved of God. It's Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson here with our fourth and final installment in recognition of National Stalking Awareness Month, which is in January of every year. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and tag some folks. I know we've got a lot going on in the national news right now, and I am so very sorry and heartbroken to hear about the death of Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gigi in that helicopter crash, along with several others. He has 4 beautiful children, and his youngest is just 7 months old. And so I'm really praying for Vanessa, his wife, and for his girls, because she's got a newborn, and she's just lost her husband and one of her daughters, and that's just unfathomable. And so let's just keep them lifted in prayer. And, you know, when things like this happen, you have a decision to make when you've got an assignment from the Lord, right? Do you postpone it? Do you set it aside for a minute? Do you pause? And really the conclusion that I came to is that I really needed to go live and maintain my commitment to what the Lord has given us to do. And now you might think, well, what has this got to do with domestic violence? What has this got to do with stalking? Please share, and thank you for joining. But it underscores for me, you know, there's always an option provided in life for us to stop, right? Or to hit the pause button, or to become so engulfed in our grief and in our shock and in our disbelief that we don't focus on the things that the Lord has assigned to our hands. And the reality of it is that a loss like this, an unexpected loss, really underscores the importance of living a full, healthy, balanced, impactful, meaningful life. You know, it just makes it more important that we understand what is important. And one thing that we can know, just watching Kobe, who was only 41 years old, is what a full, impactful life he lived, and how he gave back. And was he perfect? No, but he gave back. He cared about others. He poured into others. He encouraged others to do their very, very, very best. And so when we lose someone that we admire or we respect or that we look up to, it's not the time to stop and to hit pause. It's we really need to just gun it. You know what I mean? We need to mash the gas and make sure that we are doing all that we were put here to do. I can't speak for anyone but myself, but I'm determined to leave here empty. Everything that God has given me to do, I'm determined that it will be done before he calls me home. Amen. And so we have to keep going. And so a loss like this makes it important that we understand as well that there are many, many, many people, millions of people worldwide who live in an unhealthy, toxic, life-threatening, sanity-threatening environment every single day. And so for them, I have to keep going right now, even though I'm really sad about Kobe Bryant's passing and his daughter's passing. I've got to keep going. We have to keep going. We can't stop. We cannot stop and get sucked into grief and lose focus. We cannot. Because one thing he didn't do, he did not lose focus. Kobe went into basketball with a plan. He wasn't even 18 years old. Okay? He got drafted right out of high school to the NFL. And back then, that was not a common thing to happen. And even when he retired, he didn't get in trouble like all these other folk do when they retire, or they get lethargic, or they don't really do much. He remained active. He had a plan even for that. And so I think he's an excellent example of being able to develop a plan, to know what your purpose is, and to walk that thing out, and to walk it out with everything in you, and to leave it all on the court, leave it all on the mat, leave it all in the office, wherever God has called us to, whatever mountain he has called us to, that we just continue to press forward and to do what we were called to do in the earth. Amen. Those of us who are believers, we are the Lord's hands and feet in the earth. We are. Anything that he accomplishes in the earth, he's going to do it through us. And so we need to be willing and able and available and focus. And so we're going to finish up our series on stalking in recognition of National Stalking Awareness Month. I'm trying to tag as many of you as possible, and please share. Because even though the nation and the world is riveted right now on the passing of Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gigi, there are men and women right now living in horrible situations in which they're being mistreated, their lives are being threatened, they're being stalked, they're being beaten, they're being cursed out, or whatever. Some of them are anxious, they're fearful, some may even be entertaining suicidal thoughts. And so for that reason, I have to keep going. I have to keep going. And one of my daughters, Gigi Ayala, made a statement the other day on my Facebook page, and she said, if we can even just reach one person, it'll be worth it. And I so agree with that the challenges that we face in our personal lives don't hit a pause button because we experience loss. If anything, it exacerbates what we're already experiencing, right? And so I want to make sure that I've covered all the bases that the Lord has led me to in terms of stalking and what role it plays in domestic violence. Because oftentimes when you hear people talk about domestic violence, they'll say domestic violence and stalking. It's like an addendum, which kind of belies the fact that it's often a part of it. And there's very many different ways that it can be implemented. Okay, so here's the thing. I've tagged a bunch of folks. I don't even know how many. I have over 1,000 friends, so I certainly can't tag 1,000 people, but I'm going to tag as many as I can. And we're going to wrap this up today concerning stalking. I want you all to know that, we're passionate about this because the Lord has mantled us to address this. He has put this on our heart. We live, breathe, sleep it, praying about folk constantly, praying for the safeties of others, that we can get past those things that cause us not to hear his voice when he's telling us not to enter into certain situations or not to entertain certain relationships or whatever. And so I really just want to make sure that everything that God has called us to do, that we are doing it. That we are doing it. Hey, Misty, that we are doing it. There's so much going on, but listen, beloved, we cannot stop. We cannot stop because we are sad. We cannot stop because we've experienced a loss. Because let me tell you something. Kobe didn't stop. Kobe didn't stop. Kobe was going when he died. He was going when he died. He was on assignment when he died. He was taking his daughter to her basketball game. Okay, so he was on it when he passed. And so our desire needs to be that we are found doing what God has called us to do, that we've not neglected those things that he's assigned to us. Amen. And that we don't lose sight of the fact that it's important, the things that he's assigned to us, no matter what we're experiencing in our personal life, no matter how we feel emotionally, no matter how strong we may feel spiritually or how depleted we may feel spiritually, that when he's given us an assignment, he knew all of that ahead of time. And the expectation is that we execute, depending on his grace, relying on his grace, right? Because we know that his grace is sufficient. Hey, Apostle Stephanie, I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Please share. So we're going to wrap up our discussion about stalking because it really doesn't get enough attention. And oftentimes people think of it in addition to domestic violence. They don't consider it a part of domestic violence. And they don't really understand that often it is an underpinning of the domestic violence that we are able to recognize, okay? So this is the 16th year that National Stalking Awareness Month has been recognized. We shared this before, but we don't always have the same viewers, so we'd like to recap. This is the 16th year that it's been recognized, and it came about because in 2003, Margaret Klinke, they called her Peggy, was murdered by her ex-boyfriend, whose name I refuse to state. I just refuse. I'm just not going to say his name at all. But she'd broken up with him after 3 years, and she really felt like she couldn't stay in a relationship anymore. It had become unsafe. She relocated. He found her. At one point, he even burned down her new boyfriend's house while they were away. He knew that they were all away at one of her sister's wedding, and he burned the new boyfriend's house down. So stalking is a very, very serious offense. It is a crime in all 50 states. It is a crime under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It is a crime in U.S. territories in the District of Columbia. But the problem is that all states don't manage it the same way. All states don't define it the same way. And all states don't have the same criteria in place. And many states don't consider it a felony if it's a first offense, which means that we really still are not grasping the seriousness of it once it is discovered, okay? So it's very, very important that we educate ourselves. Hey, Prophet Melanie, that we educate ourselves, okay? Hey, Lisa. So, what is stalking? Stalking is a course of conduct directed at a specific person that creates an implicit or explicit threat and induces fear or concern for personal safety or the safety of close others. Okay? I'm going to read that again. Stalking, and there are many definitions, okay, but this is the most complete one. Stalking is a course of conduct directed at a specific person that creates an implicit or explicit threat and induces fear or concerns for personal safety or the safety of close others. So what does that mean, implicit or explicit? What do you all think that means? An explicit threat would be what? I'm going to do blah, blah, blah to you. Is explicit, right? I'm spelling out what I'm going to do to you. An implicit threat is something that's implied. And sometimes it can be very, very subtle. And it can appear to be very innocent on the surface to the people around the victim. But the victim understands what the abuser, what the perpetrator is communicating to them. Okay, so the threat can be a direct threat that is verbalized, or it can be a threat that is implied. Okay, so want to be clear about that. As with many forms of domestic violence, many victims don't recognize that they are being stalked. They don't recognize it as stalking. Okay, but when you talk to them and you ask them about the behaviors that they describe are in fact stalking behaviors. And they may not recognize it. Just like many victims don't recognize that they're a victim of domestic violence. They don't equate the yelling and the screaming and putting holes in walls and making veiled threats and walking through the house, brandishing a weapon. They don't view that as domestic violence because they haven't been hit yet. Okay? For many people, it doesn't register that domestic violence is in play until there is actual physical aggression. And there is a lot of emotional aggression and psychological aggression that is endured most times before you get to a place where the physical comes into play. Okay, so by the time we figure out that it's happening, it's been happening. Okay, and it's important for us to know that. It's important for us to know that. All right. So again, many victims don't identify that they are stalking victims. But if you talk to them and you get them to describe the behaviors of what they're experiencing or what they're observing, then you will find that they are in fact being stalked. Okay. Now, so how many different forms does stalking take? There is interference or the disruption of the victim's professional life, social life, physical life. It can include sexual attacks. And sometimes you can tell this by the adjustments that the victim makes, okay? Maybe they don't stay after school. Maybe they go to school at night, right? But they don't stay after school to socialize with classmates for 15 or 20 minutes like they used to because of what happens, when they get home, or they don't want to be out late. They want to get directly from school to home. And so they're adjusting their schedule. They're adjusting how they live their life. And these adjustments can happen and not even be a conscious decision. It doesn't have to be, well, I feel like I'm being stalked, and so therefore I'm going to adjust my schedule. That's oftentimes not how it works. A lot of times these things happen. If we could step back and pay attention to how we're responding to things, how we are moving through our day, and then ask yourself, what am I responding to? Why am I doing this differently? Why do I feel like I must do this differently? Okay, there's a reason for it. So interference is one impact that stalking has. Life invasion. repeated unwanted contact in person or by phone, no third party, get a friend of a friend to send a message, get your cousin, get a common friend or someone to send you a message or to advocate on behalf of the person who is stalking you, okay? You can be stalked by social media. You can be stalked because you're being given gifts that you don't want. You're receiving flowers that you don't want. Visits, phone calls that you don't want, okay? Text messages that you don't want. Emails that you don't want, okay? All of this is stalking behavior. Intimidation is another factor. Implicit and explicit threats. Third-party threats. Forced confrontations, property damage, and threatened suicide. Now, threatened suicide, let's talk about that for a minute. Threatened suicide is a stalking behavior. It's also incredibly manipulative because it puts the victim in a position where now they feel responsible for keeping the abuser alive. So think about that. Now you feel responsible for keeping the person alive who threatens your very existence. See how convoluted that is? It's very, very convoluted. And it's really, really effective because oftentimes victims won't exit a relationship. They won't exit it because of the threat of suicide. They feel compelled to stay. They feel like they're the only person that can cause this person to want to live. And this is knowing that this person doesn't have a problem with harming themselves, okay? So this is what you want to know. And I'm going to put my clinician's hat on for about 30 seconds here. A person who is suicidal, it's a mistake for you to think that they place a whole lot of value on your life as well, okay? Because they're not thinking rationally. This is not a rational thought process taking place, okay? And so if they're thinking about killing themselves, you're in jeopardy as well. And if it comes out of an abusive situation, then know that it's a very extreme hoovering mechanism as well to draw the victim back in. So it's incredibly, incredibly dangerous. And in a case like that, professionals need to be involved. You don't need to be trying to keep them alive by yourself. The authorities need to be called. They need to go under observation. There are other things, there are other systems in place for people who are that derailed psychologically or that derailed emotionally, okay? It's a mistake for you to try to manage that by yourself, okay? It's a mistake. So interference, life invasion, intimidation, surveillance, okay? And this is the part of stalking that people are most familiar with. Following, showing up, spying, using technology to keep tabs on the victim, or cyber stalking, right? These are all tactics that are used by a stalker to gain control. And they want mental and emotional control. They want that, they need that so that they can now control the actions of the victim, okay? 5.2 million women and 1.4 million men will be stalked each year. 5.2 million women and 1.4 million men will be stalked each year, all right? Now, so how can you help? What should you listen for? If you have a friend that's talking to you and they seem distressed and they seem uncomfortable, what is it that you should be listening for? What should you listen for? Number one, I would encourage you to not discount what they're saying to you. I think the worst thing that you can do to a victim or to anyone who has any problem, but we're talking about domestic violence, is to question the authenticity of the problem or to question the seriousness or the depth of the problem. That is offensive. It is discouraging, and you can completely send them into a tailspin unintentionally by questioning what they're saying to you. If someone says to you, I'm a victim of domestic violence, or this is what's happening to me, and your response is, oh no, they can't be doing that. Not so-and-so. They're too nice. They're too happy all the time. They're just a great person. Or what did you do to upset them? That's the worst thing you can say. That's the absolute worst thing you can say. And you contribute then to the isolation that the victim is already experiencing, okay? So even if you think it, don't let it come out your mouth, and try to keep it off your face, okay? Don't let it come out your mouth. Try to keep it off your face. So when they tell you that they're being subjected to maltreatment, you don't want to question the authenticity of their experience, okay? It almost makes you a party to the gaslighting that is always present in a domestic violence situation, because you're questioning their experience. You're questioning their ability to determine if they are being threatened or not. You're questioning their ability to discern and to interpret accurately how they are being treated. And that is exactly what the abuser does on a daily basis, okay? So, you want to listen for ongoing coincidences. What do I mean by that? The car got keyed last week. Now this week I have a flat tire. 2 weeks ago, my window was broken out. Okay, so how likely is it that these things are happening to the same person over and over and over again? How likely is it that it's a coincidence, right? So things like that happening, which can be an implied threat, because the victim can know very well who's doing it. Can know who's doing it, but can't prove it. Hasn't seen them do it. No one has witnessed them do it. But they understand that the abuser, and I don't even like to say their abuser, and my abuser, because that's ownership, and no, the abuser, okay? You don't want to own it. The abuser. It exists, but it's not mine. I'm not claiming it, okay? I'm not nurturing that. I'm not trying to encourage that at all. So ongoing coincidences is one thing that you can look for. Indicators of cyber stalking. Is there spyware on their tablet, on their phone? Is there GPS on the car? You know, there are GPS systems that they're magnetized, and you just slap them up underneath the wheel well of the car, and you wouldn't even know it was there unless you checked. Okay, so these are things that you want to educate yourself about. Does anyone have any access to your email? Do they have access to your passwords? Things like that, okay? Are your friends saying that they're getting messages that you didn't send? And if you're talking to someone who's experiencing this, then clearly it's a stalking situation. Someone has accessed their account and they're pretending to be them, okay? And this is one of the tactics that abusers will often use in order to rein in, to bring shame, to victim shame, to discredit, to embarrass their target, okay? Are they talking about threats? Have they been threatened? Especially those that indicate a lack of concern for consequences. I don't care if you call the police. I don't care if you tell your mother. I don't care if you tell my boss. Nobody's going to believe you. When there's a lack of concern about the consequences for their behavior, that's concerning. And certainly if it's verbalized, that's concerning, because they're not even worried about you knowing that they don't care. They're not even pretending to care. Okay, they don't care, and they don't want you to be deluded with the idea that they care about any possible consequences. So when a person doesn't feel that they have anything to lose, or if whatever they have to lose, they don't mind losing, that's a problem, because you cannot reason with them. They don't have a dog in the fight, okay? They're not interested in anything other than what they are after. And that is a primary underpinning of a domestic violence relationship, okay? We're still talking about stalking. Do they have a history of protective order violations? Do they have a prior history of intimate partner violence? Do they damage property? Are they threatening your pets, okay, when they get upset? Are they brandishing a weapon, all right? When the victim looks at their life, whether it's you or someone that you're helping, are they exercising behavior that could be called resistant, right? Where they're trying to hold on to their own identity. Have they said to the stalker, have they said to this person, to this ex-person, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to hear from you. I don't want an email from you. I don't want a phone call from you. I don't want to talk to your second cousin. I don't want to talk to your mama. I just want to be left alone. Has that become necessary? Have they changed the phone number? Have they changed their workplace where they work? Have they changed the route that they take to go back and forth to work? Okay. Are they doing things that they need to do to try to avoid contact with this person? Okay, because these are all behaviors. It takes a while to get to a place where a person will go through all of these things, because these are life impacting. You know, you change your phone number. Now all the people that you do actually care about now need the new number, right? So it's very, very inconvenient. Changing where you work is easier said than done. Maybe changing the shift that they work. So have they gone through these changes to try to avoid contact with this person and to try to ensure their safety? These are all indicators that they are victims of stalking, okay? Have they verbalized an increased fear regarding their own safety or that of loved ones? If they have children, are they concerned about the safety of their children? Are they concerned about the safety of their parents or their siblings? Because this person has been a part of their life and knows who their loved ones are, knows where they go to school, knows where they work, knows where they worship, and things like that, okay? Are they concerned about the safety of their family members? And then you want to look at the impact on their life. Are there disruptions to the victim's professional life, their financial life, their social life, academic life, or even relationships? As a result of interacting with this person, or as a result of coming under pressure from this person who is engaging in stalking behavior, okay? Now, if the victim describes behavior to you that on the surface doesn't sound like it should be scary, doesn't sound like it should be concerning. I mean, it's your birthday. They sent you a birthday card. I mean, it's you know, it's some special occasion. You just got promoted and they're sending you a bouquet of flowers in recognition of that. Don't superimpose what you think they ought to be feeling onto what they're feeling, okay? Respect the fact that if they're anxious and nervous about it, there's a reason for that response. Even if they can't put their finger on it, okay? Even if they can't put their finger on it, there's a reason that that bouquet of flowers is perceived as a threat. Perceived as a threat, okay? And I know when I was going through my situation, I would get to work and there'd be a tennis bracelet left. Or I'd come home and there'd be a gift on the porch. And we're not together, and we're not going to ever be together again. And stop buying stuff. Just stop it. Just cut it out. Cut it out. Just stop, okay? So it's very, very disconcerting, and it's very unsettling. But if you go to someone and say, well, I wish they'd leave me alone. They brought me a tennis bracelet. You know, they might look at you like, well, what's wrong with that? Or they brought you a bouquet of flowers. What's wrong with that? Or they bought you a box of chocolates. It's your birthday, right? What's wrong with that? You know, so we have to be careful that because the situation may not seem threatening to us, doesn't mean that it's not threatening. Does not mean that it's not threatening. And oftentimes, what an abuser will do, the power that they wield, is that they appear to be one thing when they're actually something else. They appear to be jovial and friendly, and they're not that way at all. Okay, they are not that way at all. What can you do? Encourage the victim to align themselves with a domestic violence advocate, to align themselves with the hotline.org. Lisa Alexander's on here. She's the CEO of Stand Up Survivor. Missy Shavers is on here. She's a domestic violence advocate. There's a lot of help out here. There's a lot of help out here. There's help out here, okay? More so than it was 20-something years ago when I was going through this craziness, okay? And know that a stalker can be very, very, very convincing. Let me tell you what mine did. Let me tell you what mine did. This right here, this took the cake. I had never witnessed anything like this in my life. It was an Academy Award-winning performance. Do you hear me? And it worked on everybody but me. This joker came to church. Y'all listening? He came to church right? Asked the pastor for permission to speak from the pulpit. This is after I left, because I thought, you know what? This is not my life. I'm convinced that this is not my life, right? This right here, this is not my life. This is not my life. And I'm not going to be a victim. And I also would like to not be an inmate. So I need to get out of here. But he came to church, convinced the pastor that he was so sorry about everything, right? And received permission to speak from the pulpit. He was a minister, okay? So to get in the pulpit, and he apologized to the church. And he apologized to me. And I'm sitting there thinking, you lying wonder. What you are not is sorry. You're not sorry. Okay? But this is what the church wanted to hear. Y'all hear me? This is what the church wanted to hear. See, we can unwittingly become flying monkeys. We can unwittingly become part of the cotton picking problem. So the church wanted to hear him say, it made them feel better for him to say he was sorry. Okay? Lying through his teeth. Lying. All lies. And he stood in that pulpit and declared how sorry he was. And I think he shed a tear or two. And I couldn't believe it. And I'm looking around and I'm thinking, and they are buying this. They fell for that. They fell for that. So then the pressure increased upon me, right, to take him back. The pressure increased upon me. You know, you supposed to forgive, this, that, and that. Listen, don't be that person. Don't be that person. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. And this is why we need to be educated. Because if we're not careful, we'll look for things that make us feel better. And it completely undermines the experience of the victim. It completely undermines the experience of the victim. And what I understood after the benediction was I didn't have no help. I didn't have no help. I didn't have no help because they believed him. They believed he was sorry. They believed he was sorry. That joker wasn't sorry. He was not sorry. Do you hear me? I'll never forget that. I'll never forget how isolated I felt and how alone I felt, because these people who are supposed to be my support system were so prone to believe in whatever lie he wanted to tell because it made them feel better. You understand what I'm saying? Don't be guilty of that. The truth oftentimes will make us uncomfortable. It will. The truth oftentimes will hurt us. It will. And if you hold somebody in high esteem, or you've had a lot of respect for them, or you've had a positive interaction with them, and then someone brings you this information that they are abusive, that they are stalking, that they are, physically aggressive, that they are emotionally or financially abusive, that they are sexually abusive, or whatever, if you're not careful, your need to not believe it will override what's best for that person. And then you will have missed an opportunity to minister to them and to encourage them. And at that point in time, you become a weapon in the hand of the enemy. You become a weapon in the hand of the enemy. So if someone comes to you and says that they are experiencing maltreatment, don't question them. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay? I mean, I thank God. God kept me. God kept me because I didn't have no help. You hear me? I didn't have no help. They wanted to believe. They wanted to, because he was a hellion before he got saved, okay? And they wanted to believe that he was sorry. And of course, we believe that God can heal and deliver and set anybody free. But let me tell you something. He's not going to do it against their will. And they have to desire to be delivered. They have to desire more than anything. They need to desire more than they desire you. They need to desire to have a right relationship with God more than they want you. Otherwise, this seeking a relationship with God becomes a little weapon that they use to take you hostage, is what it does. To take you hostage. Okay? It was something else. And I'm not talking about no little bitty church. I'm talking about a big old huge church. A big old huge church. Packed. It was like a Easter Sunday, whatever Sunday it was, that church was packed from wall to wall. And that critter got a standing ovation when he stood up and told that lie in the pulpit. I'm telling you, God kept me, because I didn't have no help. Because they believed him. Because they wanted to believe him. Because they needed to believe him. I couldn't understand why he could still get in the pulpit and preach. It's like, what in the world? What kind of tomfoolery is this? You know what he's doing? You're aware of what he's doing? And he can still preach? So this is what we're up against, especially, people of faith. And so this is why we are so adamant about sharing about this, so that people can understand that there are others who have gone through this before you, that there is absolutely life on the other side of it. It is a nightmare while you were in it. It remains a nightmare for a season or two while you exit. But if you utilize wisdom, and if you surround yourself with people who are truly supportive of you and don't have a need to believe that their need to believe that there's good in all mankind, which is not biblical, by the way. I don't know where we got that from, but that's not in the word. The word says the complete opposite. We all jacked up. And when we establish a relationship with God, then we get that thing turned around. We don't come here good. That's not how that works. Okay? And so we've got to be realistic with ourselves about what we are truly up against. An abuser has no problem with getting in a pulpit and telling whatever lie they need to tell. They don't have no problem with that. They have no problem with that whatsoever. They don't have a problem with pretending that everything's wonderful. They don't have a problem with that. Okay? It's very isolating. And so what we want people to know is that there's help out here. That there are people out here who's not going to question your experience, who's not going to ask you, well, what did you do to get them upset? Whether you be the man or the woman, not going to question your experience, not going to question the depth of your pain and the depth of your anguish, all right? And will undergird you and will encourage you and will walk it out with you, all right? We'll absolutely do that. We'll get you educated in all of that. Won't get upset with you when you go back to them, because that happens. We'll pray to God that you live so that you can get out again. And we'll pray that you can exit and stay out, because that's what's best, okay? And so we really just want you all to know that there's help out there. Now, some other resources are coercivecontrol.org, Outrage Us, so there's outrage and then capital US, .org is another resource. And then, of course, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, Stand Up Survivor. As I told you, Lisa was on here. And then I just want to share a few facts with you concerning stalking so that you can understand how serious it is, okay? The U.S. Department of Justice conducted the Supplemental Victimization Study in 2006. And during a 12-month period, an estimated 14 in every 1,000 persons ages 18 or older were victims of stalking. An estimated 3.4 million people were victims of stalking, okay? About one half, or 46% of stalking victims experienced at least one unwanted contact per week, and 11% of victims said they had been stalked for 5 years or more. Okay? So, more than 10% of victims said that they've been stalked for 5 years or more. My stalking situation went on for like 20, and now, every once in a while, like every other year, they try to pop up. And I shut it down and keep it moving. There's no response. There's no interaction. I don't say, don't call me. I don't say, dog, kiss my foot. I ain't got nothing to say. I'm not even acknowledging your existence, okay? And I just keep it moving, all right? Once you have experienced something like this, you have to learn to live your life differently. And don't tell yourself that you're being, that they're dictating how you live. Don't even look at it that way. You just have to use wisdom and be more safety conscious, right? And be aware of your surroundings. And so this is where safety planning comes into play. Certainly, if you have a stalker, you want to have a safety plan. And your safety plan may not look like my safety plan. The whole purpose of a safety plan, right, is to keep you alive. The purpose of a safety plan is to make it virtually impossible for the abuser to do what they are trying to do to you. All right? To make it as difficult as to prevent it when possible, but to at the very least make it as difficult as possible for them to harm you or those that you care about. All right? And so this is why safety planning is so important. Now, this study that the Department of Justice conducted in 2006 ascertained that the risk of stalking victimization was highest for individuals who were divorced or separated. And that makes sense because you're talking about the victim has exited this situation. They have gotten a divorce, or they have at least started that process by separating, putting a break in the relationship. And this is a clear indication that the abuser's losing control. And remember now, domestic violence is don't have nothing to do with love. It's all about power and control. And so once a clear signal is sent that their control of the victim is being diluted, it is being eroded, it is being broken, okay, that will often trigger, all right, the abuser, all right? So women were at greater risk than men for stalking victimization. However, women and men were equally likely to experience harassment. Okay, so what's harassment? Harassment, depending on what state you are in, are those behaviors that we've talked about, right, that fall just short of meeting the statute for stalking. It doesn't quite rise to the level of stalking in accordance with the law of the state that you reside in, but maybe if you go 2 states over, it would. Okay, now in this day of social media and dating apps and all this other stuff, you really want to be careful, because it's difficult to bring a stalking charge on someone if they live in a different area. The rules that they live under are different than the rules that you live under, depending on what state you're in. So if you're in a relationship, not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but if you're in a relationship with someone who lives in another region, you might want to explore what are the rules where they live, okay? Because, for example, it'd be difficult for you to get a restraining order on someone who is bothering you, right? And they live in another state. Who's going to give them the order? Who has jurisdiction? So it gets kind of complicated. And so that's something that you want to keep in mind too. If you're engaged in a relationship and the wheels start to come off, it starts to get a little strange, okay? You might want to explore and understand what the laws are where you are, all right? Now, 37% of males and 41% of female stalking victims were equally likely to be reported to police. So, less than half for men and women are reported. Oftentimes, they don't report it because they're not even sure what to call it. They don't know what it is. They just know this person keeps showing up. And then the police may very well say, well, they can show up wherever they want to show up. They're not bothering you, okay? And this is why I caution you before someone tells you that they're being stalked or they're having an issue or they're having a problem, get them to describe for you the actual behavior. And then help them to brainstorm ways that they can avoid coming into contact with this person. About 10% of victims were stalked 4, 5 years or more, as I said before. 5 years remotely connected to that person. It just like, I'm shutting every door. Every single door. I'm sorry that's your cousin. Okay? But we're done. I can't. I cannot. Can't do it. All right? Nearly 3 in 4 stalking victims know their offender in some capacity. More than half of stalking victims lost 5 or more days from work. So this behavior, whether the threat is implied or explicit, impacts the victim's life as they begin to make adjustments to try to avoid contact, to try to avoid dealing with it. Let's see. The survey measured the following behaviors. This is what they measured in this 2006 survey. Making unwanted phone calls, sending unsolicited or unwanted letters or emails, following or spying on the victim. And this can be done by a third party where you send somebody else to spy on them so that they don't know it's you, kind of thing. Showing up at places without a legitimate reason. Waiting at places for the victim. leaving unwanted items, presents, flowers, candy, jewelry. I experienced all of that. Okay, it's very, very weird. All right. Posting information or spreading rumors about the victim on the internet, in a public place, or by word of mouth, discrediting the victim, humiliating the victim, spreading rumors. So it's almost like the gift that keeps on giving, where this stuff can affect the victim even if they're not around, all right? The most common fear with victims was not knowing what would happen next. So the stress of not knowing what to expect, the stress of not knowing what's going to happen next takes an emotional toll, all right? And then 9% of victims reported that their worst fear was death. And again, it's challenging for a victim to get others to believe and understand the seriousness of what they are experiencing, okay? And so we've been talking about stalking. January is National Stalking Awareness Month. We appreciate everyone who has tuned in. We ask that you would share. And I just want to caution you and to encourage you that if someone tells you that they're being mistreated, don't question their experience. Don't do that. Don't cause them to doubt their own ability to discern if they're being treated well or if they're being mistreated, okay? Because it further isolates them and it strengthens the hand of the abuser in their life, okay? And then I want to leave you with this thought. 76%, and this is according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 76% of women murdered by an intimate partner were stalked first. 76% of women who were murdered were stalked first. So when stalking enters the equation, there's a heightened risk for the victim of the stalking. There's a heightened risk, all right? And 76% of women who were murdered were stalked first. And so this is why we can't ignore it and we shouldn't minimize it. And refer them to someone who can help them. Connect them to a domestic violence advocate. Give them the number for the hotline for the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, to domesticshelters.org. There's so much help out here. Also, we have a blog, Judas Roar, and I'll post a link up here for that. And if you subscribe to that, then you'll automatically receive a template for a safety plan, okay? And again, then you modify it however you need to modify it for you. I think everybody needs one because even if you're not experiencing this yourself, someone close to you may need it because it's so prevalent, okay? We solicit your prayers as we continue to press forward in terms of educating men and women, educating ministry leaders, okay, so that they know what to look for, they know what to say, they know what not to say in terms of dealing with domestic violence victims, okay? Again, we're closing out National Stalking Awareness Month. We wanted you all to understand that it plays a key role in domestic violence. It's not this little thing that happens off to the side every now and then. There's 76% of women who are murdered were stalked first. All right? This is Apostle Cheryl Richardson. We will be back on next week. And I told you that we're going to be opening up this next month to share survivors' stories. So if you are a survivor and you'd like to come on the live with us and share your story and talk about your journey, then inbox me and let me know, and we'll get that set up. I think a huge part of healing is being able to share it. You certainly shouldn't share it until you're ready, all right? But when you are ready, there's something very liberating about being able to speak about it and knowing that your experience can help others, okay? We love you. God bless you, and we will be back on next week with another broadcast. Blessings to you.